Hello, my name is James DeGraw and I am with Risk Management Professionals. Today we'll cover the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, or NDEP, management system, which includes the methods of developing management programs at a Nevada facility and how the NDEP Chemical Accident Prevention Program, or CAPP, commonly said as CAPP, management program system is audited. This is part of a series of presentations we'll broadcast on how to achieve compliance with CAPP regulations. This webinar series is a part of RMP's ongoing outreach program. Our core competencies and expertise reside in Nevada CAPP, EPA RMP, OSHA PSM, CalARP, and SEMS program development. We also perform mini HAZOP and LOPA studies and other hazard identification techniques, in addition to a variety of other process safety and regulatory standards and regulations. One of the great things about Nevada's CAPP program is that it provides a lot of resources for each facility to become compliant with CAPP regulations. Nevada's website provides the tools necessary to develop and hone compliance programs, provides comprehensive guidance for determining what programs apply to each process, based on threshold quantities, and even uses conversion factors for calculating and comparing quantity on hand to threshold quantities. So the tools are really at the fingertips of each facility to look at their facility analytically and their processes and determine what kind of coverage is necessary for their facility. The focus of the program is for owners and operators to implement workable programs that fit within organizational culture. This increases the practicality of program compliance and generates a safer environment. Again, there are conversion factors for temperatures, parts per million, stoichiometry, and other important units in regulatory language. And the website also provides source links to regulations like the Code of Federal Regulations, which may also apply to each facility. And finally, it has guidance for each element item and an audit grading sheet, which is used by regulators to conduct program evaluations on a numerical basis. CAPP audits, while similar to others, have a much more structured approach to the audit process than other regulatory agencies, and these grading systems are used during each audit. At the table below, you see the threshold quantities that are used to determine program coverage. They're for regulated chemicals, and they're really similar to the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, and the Occupational Safety Hazard Association, or OSHA, regulations. A list of some differences are listed, with the CAPP being the most stringent. CAPP also distinguishes two release thresholds for facilities that have had multiple releases at the facility, and that's where you see the middle column, which is denoted CAPP 2, and that represents if a release has occurred at least twice within a 1-year period at a facility. As you can see, elements and requirements are quite similar to other programs such as OSHA PSM and EPA's RMP. In most cases, one program can be developed that will address all of the requirements of different agencies for each facility. Two exceptions are that CAPP has requirements for much more in-depth document control and management systems, which you see at the bottom in the table on the right. On the current guidance documents, there are specific elements pertaining to these items that are required to interact with all other CAPP elements. Today, we'll focus on management systems. We'll first look into the definition of a management system before we look at how that system is incorporated in the CAPP regulations. Next, we'll go over how to develop a management system, paying particular attention with respect to CAPP regulations. And finally, we'll look at common characteristics of good as well as common deficiencies of other management systems. Management systems have external benefits as well as internal benefits. When properly implemented, they have the potential to improve corporate image, achieve financial savings through improved efficiency, lead to a competitive advantage, and achieve measurable reductions in pollution to the environment. All organizations have the right to choose the management system best suited to their internal needs and goals. A management system that follows through on a commitment to continuous improvement allows the organization using it to achieve better performance levels. This is well documented by the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, which is an organization between North American governments, as well as the United States Department of Labor and the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. The CAPP program itself emphasizes strategies that lead to energy efficiency, risk management, and safety. This is the Nevada Administrative Code, or NAC, that describes the requirements of the management system. The CAPP standard is written in very broad, performance-based language. It incorporates elements of OSHA and EPA requirements while focusing on the development and implementation of practical programs that fit within an organization's culture, so they can be implemented day to day while improving efficiency. Interpretation of these broadly stated management system requirements and the matching of these requirements to actual facility policies, practices, and procedures can be a difficult process. It is important to note when reading through the management system requirement of the CAPP regulations that this is not the only component that is necessary for compliance with CAPP requirements. There are also elements of the management system requirement that apply specifically to other elements of the program, such as to the process safety information, or PSI, or mechanical integrity, or MI sections, where changes to one element need to be managed and engaged to a corresponding change to another element. This is reflected by the diagram at the bottom, where the management system is shown to incorporate the process safety information, the MI, and the training sections, whereas each of those individual sections have overlying responsibilities in and of themselves. And we'll touch more upon the interconnectivity of these programs in a moment. However, here, I want to note that these elements must also be incorporated into the management system and are covered in more detail in NDEP's online guidance. For those facilities that are developing a management system, or for those that need to review their own management system, it's important to know the elements that are required for each program. The management plan should spell out procedures and steps for achieving compliance with environmental requirements and demonstrate continuous improvement in regulated areas in addition to other internal objects. For example, it should define the compliance roles and responsibilities of environmental protection personnel and specify how they in management will be held accountable for achieving and maintaining compliance. It should also describe how environmental performance and compliance information will be communicated to relevant employees, on-site service providers, and contractors. The management system should establish procedures for receiving and addressing concerns raised by these personnel regarding environmental performance and compliance. Management systems are in place to document the members responsible for each CAPP element. This can either be a single person or a team of people. One person is actually capable of being responsible for multiple elements, but this should be documented. And many elements of the CAPP program have overlying responsibilities. Going through this, I have a couple examples on this slide, which includes the mechanical integrity, or MI, which requires process safety information or PSI verification. So in your management program, you would specifically delineate that the PSI manager is responsible for verifying that a change engages a mechanical integrity program verification or change. The lines of authorities must be recorded, either documented with a chart or a written structure. So I see a lot of charts used, and charts are easy to understand, which makes them a great tool. But the program will also need to clearly describe the who, what, when, where, why, and how of the management system. So the chart actually is normally used as an addition to the management system. Describing these management charts more specifically, management charts can be constructed as a mental map demonstrating who is in charge of what, where job titles are listed instead of specific individuals' names. Below these job titles would be included their associated responsibilities. The job responsibilities can also denote interconnectivity of our example, like the PSI and MI, using pointed arrowheads to reflect how one role engages a change in another's responsibility. So the PSI would have a pointed arrow to the MI in that management chart, indicating that their responsibility directs a change in the mechanical integrity program. This also helps with facility personnel turnover. By placing job titles into management charts instead of individual names, one can circumvent issues where organizational charts don't reflect new hires or promotions. A table can then be included as an attachment or an appendix to the management program with the names of personnel filled in besides the specific role as necessary. Finally, the management plan must be incorporated into the document control program. So the management plan is controlled as a document at the facility, and current revisions of it are in use and in circulation at the facility. Diving deeper into the interconnectivity in the management systems, the management plan requirement applies to each CAPP element. It is important to note how each element applies to one another. For example, the management of change, or MOC, and the pre-startup safety review, or PSSR, and also the verification of compliance audit and contractor plans simply delineate responsibility, whereas other elements will require interconnectivity between one another. We previously talked about the PSI and MI example, and this relationship is usually also present in the Emergency Action Plan, or EAP, the PSI, the MI, and also the mechanical integrity, the training, the PHA, and SOPs. In these program elements, the person or persons in charge of each respective element need to communicate with one another for updates. For example, the PSI needs to be validated prior to triggering a change to the MI program. Thus, there must be steps or procedures within the management of the process safety information before changing the MI program. This is so that the maintenance programs don't change unless necessary, reducing unnecessary program alterations and increasing efficiency. This also has the effect of improving efficiency not just due to save time and effort, but it further avoids potential issues associated with having discrepancies in the programs, such as changes to PSI impacts and the MI program without being documented. Looking into the more integrated plans, the Emergency Action Plan has specific requirements for how the alarm system maintenance is determined, which gives it a direct link to the MI program, and the EAP has direct requirements for how training is conducted and tracked, which is linked to training. A PHA has direct requirements in its regulations for how PSI is verified, obviously linking it to PSI, and it has direct recommendations to share the PHA findings with affected employees, which directly links it to training and potentially PSI and even MI training. Furthermore, SOPs have direct links to training because it has a regulatory standard declaring how SOPs and SWPs, which are safe working practices, are determined to provide clear instruction and a language understood by all operators. And finally, training kind of circumvents each of these elements because it's necessary for employees and operators and other personnel to understand each change as it is conducted. So in developing a management system, it's obviously crucial to assign responsibilities. Because there are many overlaps in the CAPP element responsibilities, and because facilities differ rather greatly in how responsibilities that aren't going to be included under the CAPP program are delineated, it's useful to lay out a chart in order to visualize the interconnectivity between CAPP elements. I find that these charts that commonly function as a tree or a flow chart or a mind map, perhaps, are really useful in communicating function and demonstrating day-to-day activities. Depending on how an organization's culture is organized, there may be individuals specifically responsible for operating equipment, whereas another maintains training programs and administrative updates while working with operations for feedback on the accuracy and effectiveness of administrative programs. It's helpful to note that some training conditions, such as for the MI, EAP, or SOP requirements, can either be included as part of that specific element or as part of overall training management. Although this decision may be easier to manage where one person is responsible for multiple requirements, for example, at smaller facilities, it may be more difficult for one person to be responsible for an entire program at larger facilities, where sometimes a whole team of people may be responsible for just one element, such as training or operating procedures. Assigning roles in the management system should involve each person participating in the execution of that management system. This is not only to ensure that individuals are aware of their responsibilities, but it will also yield the opinion of individuals that are carrying out each CAPP element management task. This will yield a more in-depth perspective into how the task will be carried out. The personnel should be included in the development of the management program, who will be involved in the update and execution of the responsibilities therein. Having discussions regarding the most efficient management responsibility will facilitate the development of the best system for the organization culture. I also recommend writing out responsibilities. Writing out the responsibilities for each element takes critical thought into the weakness of the entire program layout. This is not to say that this document should simply restate CAPP requirements. The management system belongs to the facility for which it is written. So the management system should reflect CAPP requirements, but not be limited by them. There is no limit to the information that can be included in the management system. And furthermore, including information like the design intent or model followed can be useful to track. The management system should summarize the responsibility and assigned role for each person and describe how groups work together in order to conduct items like training. So one could review the write-up and identify any items that aren't qualified or quantified when applicable. It's important to include SOP callouts as they are identified either by their title, reference number, or location within the management program itself. And also it's important to note how the management system will be continuously documented. This could be just including it in the document control system that you have at your facility if it's present, or ensuring that clear reasons for revisions and updates are described. Ensure also that the location of each document is written out in the management plan. So for example, note where the SOPs are available and accessible for employees along with other items. Some items may not be required to be accessible by personnel. Finally, perform a dry run. Run through the roles and responsibilities of the management program and ensure that it completely describes the process of fulfilling CAPP requirements. Some of the characteristics of good management systems that I commonly see include a detailed description, where the management system describes how these elements will be integrated into the organization's overall decision-making and planning. In particular, decisions on product and process design, training programs, and maintenance activities. I also see a lot of good management programs that have sufficient personnel, where the management system should spell out the procedures and steps for achieving objectives and targets that are set by the organization. For example, it should define the compliance roles and responsibilities for personnel, specify how they and management will be held accountable for achieving and maintaining compliance, and describe how environmental performance and compliance information will be communicated to relevant employees, on-site service providers, and contractors. The next item we have is personnel understanding. The management system should establish procedures to ensure that all personnel, including employees, on-site service providers, and contractors whose job responsibilities affect the ability to achieve management system objectives and targets, have been trained and are capable of carrying out these responsibilities. In particular, the training should highlight means to enhance the ability of personnel to ensure compliance with environmental requirements and voluntary undertakings affecting the organization. And finally, continuous evaluation. The management system should require periodic, documented, and objective auditing of the organization's performance in achieving these objectives and targets, and on how well the management system assists the organization in achieving those objectives and targets. The goal of the review should allow management to bring about overall improvements. The scope and frequency of the review should depend on the size and complexity of the organization and other factors that are determined relevant in each organization. So, audit preparation can be conducted by using the audit sheets that are available at NDEP's website for internal compliance audits. Using these resources will help to develop your program as well as to help maintain it and keep it consistent with current regulations. So if you go to the NDEP website that's linked at the bottom, you'll find both the PDF and Word documents of the sheets that are used by auditors in order to review your facilities program. It's always advised to fill out the audit worksheets as internal practice. Some areas that I see management systems can commonly improve upon and are thus good to check against your own management system is a lack of current written procedure for tasks or activities. For example, one of the requirements, again, is strictly for PSI management to engage in an MI program revision. This means that the PSI management system needs to reflect that it will engage in MI revision if found necessary, and also the qualitative events that would indicate that is a necessary scenario. Another deficiency is discrepancies between the written procedures steps and actual trainings. This reflects how the way things are done can be changed without the administrative document being changed to reflect the change in actual procedure. Next, the actual management is not based on the management document. So failure to follow written procedures is another way to say this, and it's usually because of inadequate, missing, confusing, or incorrect information in the procedure, or a facility culture that does not support procedures as the accepted way to perform a task activity. Insufficient management systems ensure that procedures are followed and/or the existence of multiple conflicting procedures. Finally, lack of personnel training on the procedures is another common deficiency. Personnel need to be trained on the way these documents are written, the meaning behind them, and the reasoning for selecting the approach. In conclusion, management systems are integral to organizational culture, and by developing them, organizations increase their efficiency and save money. Management systems are developed by taking into account a broad perspective of the responsibilities included in CAPP elements and accordingly delineating them. Management systems should fit well into an organization's culture such that efficiency is increased with increased compliance and safety. This is a list of references that were used in the compilation and construction of this PowerPoint. And if you have any questions, you can contact me at my email, which is listed on the PowerPoint slide, or you can contact our office, whose number and website are listed at the bottom of the slide. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy your day.